Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is Rock at the What's Up Falcons podcast, and I'm joined with my boys. My boys in the house. Where you at?
Yeah. What up?
Oh, gee, and we have Q, and we have Hoop in the house.
Q's here, the most beloved guy in all of sports entertainment.
Indeed. Hey, y'all, we want to thank everyone for listening to us, and if you want to listen to some great Falcons information, check us out on the What's Up Falcons podcast. Right, fellas?
Right. Sure. Hey, we here every week, baby.
We keeping it real, so check us out there on Twitter. Holla. Peace.
Subscribe to the What's Up Falcons podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. Listen to the What's Up Falcons podcast at whatsupfalcons.com.
The OSG Sports app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG Sports app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Get the OSG Sports app today.
Welcome to the College Football Debrief on the CFB on OSG with your host, the Online Sports Guys.
Tommy Palmer, thanks, and welcome to the College Football Debrief. It's time to preview the SEC. John Wilkerson here with you. We'll be joined by Bill Shanks from The Bill Shanks Show on the superstations.com. And Anthony Goldman is with me. We'll hear from Anthony a little later, and he and I will get into a deep conversation about the SEC for the 2019 football season. And joining us to talk SEC football is Bill Shanks from The Bill Shanks Show on the superstations.com. And Bill, you're always a regular on the College Football Debrief, and we welcome you back for another college football season. Let's start talking about the SEC, and we'll start in the East. Kind of know who you're looking at in the East right now, your Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia looks like a team to me that is ready to take that next step on the national stage. They had that shot a couple of years ago here in Atlanta, and it escaped. But I think this team might have the mentality, the mental toughness to get it done this time.
Well, there are a lot of things that are kind of in place for them to have that kind of run, John, and I think that's what has a lot of people here in the state of Georgia excited. I mean, first and foremost, when you have a junior quarterback who's got 2 full years experience and who has done what Jake Fromm has done, you feel good about the leadership at the top. And as we all know, the quarterback is so important to every football team. And Jake's just done so much over the last 2 years to make Georgia fans feel like, boy, this is the window we have available now. If Jake leaves the NFL after this year, which, I mean, we assume that he will. We don't know for sure. But, you know, anytime you have a junior quarterback heralded like this, you know the possibility is there. So you want to take advantage of that. But it's other things. It's the offensive line of scrimmage. It's the depth on defense. It's the skilled players who some even are not even tested, but are very heralded and are very talented and have great potential to do great things. The pieces are just in place, and I think that hunger for what they know they have to do to get in that conversation with Clemson and Alabama is what will drive this football team this season.
And also, let's face it, they got to get over that Alabama hump. They've met in the title game, national title game, and the SEC title game, in both at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and it hasn't worked out well for the Bulldogs. So psychologically, if they meet the Crimson Tide again at Mercedes-Benz for the SEC title again, they got to get over that hump, right?
Absolutely, no doubt. They've got to beat Alabama, and they've got to. They've got to. I mean, no one in the SEC has come as close as Georgia has to knocking them back off their perch. I mean, you can't get closer. They were in the national championship game, and then last year they had the lead and they couldn't hold it, and they lost it and lost the game, obviously, to Alabama. So it's a hurdle. I mean, and look, anybody in the SEC knows that if they're going to be successful at a high level, they're going to have to knock off Nick Saban in Alabama until the day he leaves. And that's just the way it is. And so, yeah, they've got to do that. And, you know, they've got someone driving the bus, so to speak, who's been there, who you know wants to do it more than anyone himself, and that's Kirby Smart. So, sure, that's something you can't ignore. It's there, and it's got to happen for them because, and, you know, there's even people who think, well, if something happens where Alabama doesn't get in the SEC championship game and we beat LSU, it won't be as good. Oh, yeah, it will. you won't care about that. You'll enjoy it.
That's exactly. Now, will Florida be the main challenger in the East for Georgia? And does that November 2nd game in Jacksonville loom pretty large this year?
I believe so, and of course there's still a lot of questions with Florida, which we'll see pretty soon, obviously, in week Saturday. But they are an interesting team, and obviously Dan Mullen, I think, is the right fit for the coach there. He had a very successful first season, so he's very cocky. He's very confident of his ability to get Florida back on top. And there's been a lot of talk over the all season, but we'll see. I think it depends on Felipe Franks. I mean, if he's able to make Felipe one of his quarterbacks, so to speak, like he did with Dak and Fitzgerald, then, I mean, there's no doubt the ability is there for him to have a good team this year. Their running backs are back, it seems like, but, they've got some questions on that team. But, yeah, that November 2nd game is it. I mean, they've got both of those teams have a lot of work to do before then, but I mean, that's going to determine the East more than likely, and that's the way it should be, to be honest with you. But I think of the other teams in the conference. I mean, I think Missouri's an interesting team. I mean, they got Kelly Bryant, and we'll see how Derek Dooley does with him. And I know some people are kind of thinking Missouri may be a sleeper team that nobody's really talking about. But I think until they prove otherwise, Florida's the team to kind of beat for that second spot right now on paper.
Yeah, Missouri's my dark horse in the East, and it's not necessarily because of Kelly Bryant, but Larry Roundtree is a horse. I mean, that guy can get it done. And the defense for Missouri is a little better, and I think people will give him credit for it. I really like what defensive coordinator Ryan Walters has been doing with that Mizzou defense.
Well, you're right, and I'm glad you brought up Roundtree because he's an outstanding football player, and they're going to be tough. I mean, they were tough last year. I have to give Barry credit for someone who I don't think people thought was going to be a really great head coach. I mean, he's put together a program there for long term and doing things that are very, very respectable for that program. So yeah, I'm anxious to see how good they. And I like Derek Dooley a lot. I think he's a good coach. I don't know if he's a good head coach or not. I mean, Tennessee fans would obviously say that he's not or was not, but I think he's a good coach, and we'll see what he does to Kelly. But when you've got a horse like Roundtree, man, that's what the SEC is all about. And that on any given Saturday, that kind of player can do damage to any defense that has an off day. So you got to be respectful of that for certain.
Yeah, I'm racking my brain because I watched Mizzou football all my life, and I can't think of a big-time running back that's come out of Mizzou really probably since Tony Galbraith came out in the mid-'70s. I mean, this is a whole new dynamic for Mizzou to have that kind of home run hitter and that battering ram coming out of the backfield, that combo for the Tigers. I think that's the only one I can think of that has had that big-time quality at Missouri.
Well, you said the term home run hitter, and, I remember a decade ago, Mark Rick was on my show, and it was when Georgia was having a little bit of a cold snap running back. They turned around and got Isaiah Crowell, and then they got Gurley and Marshall, and then, of course, Chubb and Michelle, and now they've got Swift and White, and they've done much better in that time since. But I remember Mark Rick saying, we've got to get a home run hitter at running back. I think every SEC team that wants to do good things has to, I mean, you look at great teams in the SEC, they usually have that kind of back. I mean, look at what Kentucky has done the last few years, and you got to give Benny Snell a lot of credit, don't you? I mean, he was an outstanding running back that made their team different, that gave them that. Make sure they had Josh Allen on defense and everything. But I mean, they had that home run hitter, that backfield that could go for 150 if he had a great night, and I think SEC teams know it. It may have taken Missouri a little bit of time to get into the conference and learn it, but if you have that, you got a legit chance to win some ball games.
We're previewing the SEC with Bill Shanks from the Bill Shanks Show on the superstations.com. And let's move over to the West, Bill, because obviously it's probably the top division in college football, but you have in the top four of that division, you have an interesting dynamic. You got Alabama, which is clearly the Mac Daddy of the SEC West and has been during the entire Nick Saban era. And then you got Texas A&M that really looks like that up-and-coming team that can challenge the Crimson Tide. And then you got LSU, which kind of is a mystery team. I mean, they come back off a 10-win season, and they're kind of lurking under the weeds a little bit. And then you got Auburn, which has really good talent, but it just seems like they're in desperation mode down on the Alabama plains, and you get a feeling that Gus Malzahn's job security is just not there. And so you have 4 of the top 4. You have a real interesting dynamic between those 4.
Well, you do, and all of them have some questions. I mean, even Alabama with their linebacker situation, there's some questions there, and you have to kind of worry about that. But I think you know, they still separate themselves from those other 3. I mean, there's intrigued by Texas A&M with Kelly Mond and what he is and how good he might be. There's no doubt about that. I mean, he says he's really good. He told us in SEC Media Days he was the best in the conference. And we'll see. I mean, look, they've got, unbelievable facilities, unbelievable resources. That's why Jimbo's there compared to where he was at, obviously, in Tallahassee. And I don't know if he's gotten the talent that quickly to be able to push Alabama right now, and it may still take you some time. I think if I'm Alabama, I'm as worried about A&M as anybody else in that division. But A&M's got talent. Auburn had a quarterback, and I know they'll have a quarterback, but I don't know who's going to be right now. I don't know if Gus knows, but I think we'd be a little bit more concerned about their ability to have a great season. I mean, concerned meaning, it's just you don't know. I've always said, John, if you're going into the season with a new quarterback or a new center, don't have high expectations until you see what those 2 positions can do, because you just don't know. And I think Auburn, while they have that great defensive line with several NFL players on that line, until they settle in on that quarterback and Gus gets someone he could be real confident in, I don't know what to expect from Auburn. It may take half the year to figure that out. So, and usually that's the kind of combination of things that allow Alabama to kind of get off to a great start and take off and be unbeatable. So, there's some interesting teams in that division. There's no doubt, and they're going to be really good teams. But how good enough to beat Alabama? It's hard to predict right now.
Well, you bring up Auburn in the quarterback situation, and it's really between a redshirt freshman in Joey Gatewood and a true freshman in Bo Nix. And you're starting off in Arlington, Texas against Oregon, an Oregon team that's kind of carrying the flag of the Pac-12 conference and wants to do what Washington couldn't accomplish last year right down the road for me at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So right off the bat, Auburn has a tough hill to climb.
They really do, and the Oregon quarterback's going to want to make that impression on the national stage. He's going to want to do well because everybody's watching him for the NFL. And I mean, look, but then he's got to go up against a very good defensive line, which will be a good test for him. But whoever between Gatewood and Nix, whoever gets that job, I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, I keep on trying to say, and talking a lot about Georgia, it's like. And I always use a lot of Georgia comparisons because that's the team I cover the most. But my point is, when Jacob Eason got hurt 2 years ago and they turned around and called on Jake Fromm, there were a lot of people in the stands that day. They were like, "Oh my God, we've lost Jacob Eason. We're having to put in a true freshman." Now I live in Macon, and Jake Fromm played in my area in Warner Robins, and I had him on my high school football show every Friday night for his senior and junior season, so I knew this was a very good player. I wasn't panicking. And Jake, of course, has done unbelievable things since he stood in there the first quarter of his freshman season when he had to take over for the injured Jacob Eason. Not everybody can do that, and I've almost here's another comparison, John. I have to a lot of times tell my listeners my opinion about, look, not everybody can be Ronald Acuna at 21 years old. Austin Riley, for example, cannot be on. We can't expect Austin Riley to be as great for every day like Ronald Acuna, because what Austin Riley went through by doing well early on and then struggling is the norm. Ronald Acuna is not the norm. I don't think Jake Fromm's the norm, because who does what he's done stepping in like he did as a true freshman? And my point with all that is that's where you get into when you have someone taking over that system, especially, I mean, if they go with Bo Nix, and he may be the best one. He may be the one that Gus feels best about. He may be the one that Gus thinks is the best one to kind of take over that program. But what are the expectations going to be in the first month? What are the expectations going to be in that first game? And that's just something that absolutely none of us know. But you got to feel like if Gus goes in that direction, he's got to feel that, you know, they've done their homework to truly believe that this kid's got the ability and the makeup to be okay if that presents itself, where he's got to step out there from day one, because boy, there's a lot of pressure with that. I mean, right. But you know, some can do it, and that's probably one of the more interesting decisions that have to be made here. Probably in the next week to 10 days. Right.
Now, I've gone on record already saying that, to me, nationally, Texas A&M is my dark horse, because they get to play Alabama and Clemson on the regular season schedule. They're the only ones that have that opportunity, and I think that's a huge motivating factor. I just don't like the way they finished the season at Georgia and at LSU to end the season. That's tough. But as you and I, we're media members, so we like to talk scenarios here. Let's say they beat both Clemson and Alabama, but losing their last two games, but it's good enough to get them in the SEC title game, and they win that over, let's say, over Georgia. Could Texas A&M have the juice to be a two-loss team that got into playoffs?
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, that schedule obviously is the story for them, and you know, I've said again, connected to Georgia. I mean, if Alabama and Clemson beat Texas A&M's going to be, and that's the only games they lose up into the Georgia game, they're going to be a top-ranked or a top maybe 8th-ranked two-loss team coming into Athens, and they're going to still have good thoughts about what can happen for them. But if they beat Alabama, I mean, then it's, you know, who knows? I mean, sure, that is the scenario that I think the selection committee wouldn't want to have. It's easy when Georgia's played Austin Peay and then gotten blown out by 3 touchdowns or 4, whatever it was, to LSU. But if it's a scenario like that, which you're describing, that's a nightmare situation for them, because then they really got to make some tough decisions. But that's the kind of, John, that's the kind of schedule, to be honest with you, that every school should play every year, I think.
Oh, no kidding. No kidding. Okay, the pressing question I've got for you is, will Arkansas win an SEC game this year?
Well, I sure do hope so. I have to rely on my Arkansas expert to answer that question better than I. But you know, you're starting over. It's a long road, and you know, like we were talking about earlier about, you know, when you kind of start over with a new quarterback and a new center. Boy, when you start with a new coach, you've got a long way to go. You have to be patient. I'll ask you, do you think Arkansas fans have the patience to let this ride and see if he can do the job?
Well, I think that the patience is a little thin, but I think that, yes, they're willing to wait. September 7th at Oxford against Ole Miss is the key game, really, because that's the game that could break the streak of losses in conference and give Arkansas a chance to feel good about themselves when they host Colorado State the next week. You know, the schedule at the beginning kind of works out well for them, with Portland State to open the game in Fayetteville, and then obviously Ole Miss, Colorado State, San Jose State. There's a possibility that they go 4-0 when they face the Aggies at Texas A&M in Arlington. And I think that'll be 2 wins away from bowl eligibility. And then you got to look and see where those wins come from as the season progresses. So 4 wins is kind of the floor to me as far as where Arkansas is going to be, including an SEC win. But I kind of like what they're doing, what Chad Morris is doing. They've got a quarterback this year, and I think Nick Starkel will be the starter before the year is over. But Ben Hicks steps right in and knows that offense. He played for Chad Morris at SMU. And I really like Rakeem Boyd if he stays healthy. I mean, he's one of those under-the-radar type of running backs. For me, it's whether John Chavis' defense can stop anybody. That's been the whole key. They have not been able to make those big stops. So I think 4 wins is a floor for them, and 6 wins is gettable. But after that start, we got to see where those wins come from and how it all shakes out as we head into midseason.
I think you have to feel good about Chad Morris. You have to feel good about Coach Chavis. I mean, he's really good, and I think you just have to have patience. You have to, it's one thing if, and then again, I apologize, but I told Georgia fans that first year of Kirby Smart, I said, don't expect anything from this coach this year one. You can't sit here and have unrealistic expectations. And he had talent, but the transition takes time. Well, I mean, Arkansas doesn't have the talent that Kirby inherited, for example. Chad doesn't have the talent that Kirby inherited, and so it takes more time. It takes more time. And you know what, John? I've learned, and again, you're gonna disinvite me from your show for all these comparisons to UGA. But I've learned about the recruiting matters, and the difference between good and great. You've got to have great recruits. You've got to have great players. The talent level has got to be so good. I mean, I'm seeing now a Georgia team that has 5-star offensive linemen on the second string. I'm seeing, other 5-star players who got pushed down to the second, third string in the linebacker core leave and transfer to go to Florida. That's something you strive to have because that's depth beyond compare. But you've got to have great recruiting, and once you get a couple of great recruits, it kind of steamrolls and it's a domino effect. And I think that's what Chad Morris has got to have, and what every other coach in the SEC West, particular, has to strive for to be able to get up to that upper echelon of those teams that are at the top of that division.
I'm never going to disinvite you into my show for making the Georgia references, but we are going to turn that into a drinking game.
I think you should. Well, when you cover a team that closely, it's hard to not do, but especially when you talk about him every day for 3+ hours on the radio. But it's funny, though. I've learned a lot about college football the last 3 years watching how this coach builds a program. And, of course, he learned from the master, right? I mean, He learned from someone that everybody strives to beat. It's like we were talking on our show the other day about how, Kirby's. Oh, I know what. Let me use this context. The Tennessee fan called up, and I actually let him through on my phone system that I've got. John, you'll be proud of me, and I let him talk. And he was talking about the patience he was having with Jeremy Pruitt, and I said, look, Jeremy Pruitt is probably the one in the SEC East that scares me more than Will in South Carolina or Mullen at Florida, because he has seen the process play out just like Kirby Smart. You know that Jeremy Pruitt knows what happened in Alabama to let them get to that level. He knows about defense, and he knows, like Kirby Smart knew when he walked the door in Athens, line of scrimmage. And, skill players are all over this area. I mean, I'm not saying you don't want 5-star skill players, but you want those guys up front. And I think when programs start, I think Jimbo knows that, don't you? I mean, I think Jimbo is fully aware of that at A&M. He knew that at Florida State, and he knows that where he's at now at College Station. But it's like you see a program kind of develop into what Georgia has and to follow that blueprint, which there's nothing wrong with copying a blueprint of success. Oh, you and I were talking about this on our show about how teams in the ACC have got to look at Clemson and say, okay, how the heck did they do that? What can we do to follow that blueprint? And that's what schools have to do.
You're right. They've got to it's all about getting the best players, really, and having the facilities and having that brand name, and everybody's looking for that way to develop that brand. Bill, promote what you're doing.
Well, we are on every afternoon in Middle Georgia on 93.1 FM in Macon, 105.9 FM in Warner Robins, 98.3 FM at South Central Georgia. But most of your listeners can follow me on Twitter at Bill Shanks and listen to our show weekdays at 3 o'clock on thesuperstations.com.
And Bill, we appreciate you being on, and we look forward to having you on throughout the season to talk SEC football, Georgia football, and what else is on your mind on the College Football Debrief. Many thanks for your time.
Great to be back on with you, John. Thank you.
When I come back, Anthony Goldman joins me, and we start our preview of the SEC as the College Football Debrief continues after this timeout.
Want tickets to the big game? Go to SeatGiant.com. Use the code SDH at checkout. It helps you and it helps us. That's SeatGiant.com.
College football fans, check out the College Football Debrief. Here's a sample of what you get. And joining us is Don Munson, the voice of the Clemson Tigers. You have had a front row seat to witness what Trevor Lawrence has accomplished as a true freshman. What amazes you about Trevor?
First and foremost, the most impressive thing about Trevor is the way that every time he has stepped on a football field this season, he took a step forward. There was never any regression from Trevor Lawrence. And that, to me, is amazing for a kid that young to come right out of high school and do what he's doing and lead a team to a national championship. And then the other is just the way that he handles himself. He's so calm, he is so cool, he is so collected that he just gets things taken care of. And it's not a show. What you see is exactly what Trevor Lawrence is.
You can catch the College Football Debrief on Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Check out the College Football Debrief on the OSG Podcasting Network.
And welcome back to the College Football Debrief, our SEC football preview. Anthony Goldman here. I am going to be running point because John Wilkerson's busy coming up with this drinking game for Bill Shanks. How you coming over there with your squares?
Not so good right now. We're going to have to wait till the season gets really going, and he's all fired up about the Georgia Bulldogs, which we're going to talk about a little later as we preview the East. If that happens, when he's on the show, there's going to be a lot of blurry-eyed people midday listening to this.
The one thing that concerns me is a lot of people listen to this in their cars. So
that's true. That's true.
They may need to change their listening habits because Bill will get them pretty sauced up once we get this drink.
Especially Bulldog fans.
All right, well, let's get right into it. And since we're talking Georgia, you want to start in the East?
Yeah, let's do the East.
Let's talk with the East, and when you talk the East, you got to talk Georgia. You heard what Bill was saying about the Dogs. I mean, everybody's unanimous pick in the East, John.
Yeah.
I'm going to go a different route with you on Georgia because we know how good they are. We know the talent that they have. Is there something with Georgia that you're keeping an eye on? I don't want to say concern, but something that you want to see from this team that's not proven yet, maybe a potential pitfall.
Well, it's not necessarily a position group or lack of talent or depth or that kind of thing. To me, it's getting over those humps, and that major hump is Alabama right now. Because for Georgia to be considered, and you and I consider them, I guess the best term is the big three between Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia. We consider Georgia in that class.
Yes.
But there are some humps they've got to get over, and that Alabama hump is the biggest one. They've had 2 shots in a championship format to get it done, basically in friendly atmosphere in Atlanta and Mercedes-Benz, and they've been classic games, but something has gone wrong. Whether it's a bad coaching decision or just an overall great play that happened in the national championship game. To me, that's what Georgia lacks. To me, is I don't want to say killer instinct, but something along those lines. Need to be a little more buttoned up, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, well, for me, there's 2 things with Georgia that stick out, and it's hard to poke holes in this Georgia team because they're just so deep, so talented. One thing, though, that does catch my eye, John, is I would say this is Kirby's most talented team at Georgia.
Yeah.
From top to bottom, just depth chart roster, starting 22. This is probably the most gifted group of players he's had, but it's also one of the youngest that he's had. And keeping those young guys focused week in and week out could be something that Kirby has to work with. It's always, interesting to see how young guys get dialed in into a long season. The other thing, obviously, is just the unknown names at wide receiver. We know they have talent, but they are replacing a lot of talent at wide receiver, and we need to see some of these guys step up. I know Demetrius Robinson is really the only known, I would say, that you can count on Robinson. After him, you're going to have to see if some of these guys can kind of step in, make their names known. But we know they're talented. We know that they're going to arrive.
Let me ask you this. Does that put a little more pressure on DeAndre Swift and Zamir White to perform big time as running backs, to be able to get, for Jake Fromm to get those confidence in those wide receivers?
I think it does. I think that this year their running back group excites me more than it has in quite some time because I know
deep.
Georgia loves their dynamic duos of running backs, Michelle and Chubb and Gurley and all these guys that they've been able to kind of pair together. I think the pairing of Swift and White is going to be one of the best pairings we've seen. Zamir White, if he can stay healthy, is going to be a stud. We know he is. DeAndre Swift is such a big play threat. With this offensive line, they are going to gash people.
Yeah.
And, of course,
an impressive line.
Jake Fromm is going to get his numbers, but this offense can lean on the running game. So that is, as you say, that's definitely going to help out this wide receiving group. This defense is what it is. They're going to force a lot of turnovers, get great pressure on the quarterback. I mean, they're stout. It's hard to poke holes in this team. So looking at this schedule, they open with Vanderbilt, then they come 3 straight at home in their home stretch of 3 games with Notre Dame. And that's one people are going to be circling because of the name brand. Do you think Notre Dame can hang between the hedges? I mean, is this Notre Dame team bringing enough back from next year that you think they can give Georgia a threat, or do you think this is a big game off name brand only?
Well, I think Notre Dame is going to be there. I don't know if they can sustain it for 4 quarters because that atmosphere at between the hedges is going to be off the charts. And we've seen some off-the-charts games there before. This might set a new level. But Notre Dame will be coming off a road game against Louisville, a home game against New Mexico. So, have they faced the competition they really need to face to be successful against Georgia? Georgia's already going to have, you mentioned Vanderbilt, Murray State, and Arkansas State. Vanderbilt might give them a little test first half.
On the road.
Yeah, on the road.
Opening weekend.
Arkansas State isn't going to be the pushover that most people think. They won't sustain 4 quarters against Georgia, but they'll rough them up a little bit. So with the Fighting Irish, I just don't think they're going to be tuned up enough to be able to handle that atmosphere between the hedges. So you get the feeling like right around the 3rd quarter that it's going to get away from them. And dude, I really like Jake Fromm going up against that defense.
Oh, I do too. And the reason why I bring this game up, John, is because I know when we get to week 4, everybody's going to be blowing this game out. It'll be game of the week. Everybody will be talking about it.
We will be talking about it.
We'll be talking about it. But I just don't think Notre Dame's going to be able to hang in this game, and I think Ian Book is going to be rocked. I think this is the game where Georgia makes a statement, and it carries them through the rest of the year. I mean, after that, they get a bye week. They do go to Knoxville, but Jeremy Pruitt's not ready yet for this Georgia monster. South Carolina, Kentucky, they'll win those games. Florida and Jacksonville, to me, is where it all starts for them. They have a hard month of November, and Florida and Jacksonville, Missouri at Auburn, Texas A&M. That's a hard 4-game stretch, and I know we love this Georgia team. I think this Georgia team will have a loss at some point, and it's going to come in this stretch because when you look at these teams right here, John, these are all 8-win minimum teams that they're playing back to back to back.
Well, let's see where Auburn is in November because we know they've got really good talent. We'll talk about them a little later in the West. But let's see where they are November 16th because that's a program that could be really good or could be kind of in a free fall. In that stretch, the team I would be kind of worried about is Missouri. And we'll talk about them a little later. But the Tigers have really built something nicely there. But I'm going to hold off a little bit on Missouri until we get to them.
Well, I don't, the end of the season with Georgia Tech, I don't want to bog us down. I know you and I both like Georgia in the East. We can talk about the SEC championship game later. But my question for you is Georgia at the point now to where if they have a 1-loss season, let's just say for argument's sake, 12-0, unbeaten regular season, lose to Alabama, are they at the point now to where they're a playoff lock with 1 loss regardless of a conference title?
I believe so, because the body of work the last few years has been pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So yeah, they that's what I've said. When the top 3 teams, they have that shot to be that one-loss team without a conference title to get in, because they've got the juice. They're going to pass the eye test every time.
Yeah.
And don't disregard that, because I think that's as much as anything to get in the playoff as strength of schedule and all the other variables. Yes, I do think they're a one-loss team without a conference title that can get into the playoff.
I agree. If they have one loss this season, no matter when that loss is, title or not, they're in the playoff. The team that's going to be trying to give them that one loss, Florida Gators. Let's go next with Florida. Dan Mullen has had, a great year last year. A lot of offseason hype around this team. The media is really buying into Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I almost feel like maybe we're putting a little too much pressure on Florida to kind of have an encore of what they did last year.
Yeah.
Got to be careful that we don't run into what happened with Jim McElwain and Will Muschamp. They had double-digit wins too. And then the pressure kind of got to them. So we'll see where this Florida team is. But when you talk Florida offense, Felipe Franks, John, the turnaround he had last year, to me, was pretty extraordinary.
Don't you credit a lot of that to Dan Mullen?
Absolutely. It shows how good of a quarterback coach he is. Is there another level for Felipe Franks, or has he almost tapped out? Have we seen Felipe at his best, or do you think that Felipe can even take another step?
I think he can take another step, but I think a lot of things have to fall into place for that to happen. We look at their running game, and you and I both like LaMichael Perrine, and
proud of Theodore, Alabama.
Exactly, and if he has a big year, I think that's going to help Felipe Franks a lot. That core wide receivers with Van Jefferson, Tyree Cleveland, and Josh Hammond, those guys are comfortable with Felipe Franks. And then his athleticism that he has, too, are huge. My real concern about Florida is they had a rough offseason. All the issues with the recruiting class that came in, getting guys eligible, that just screams to me about depth issues that Florida is going to have. And it was an impressive class, but not that impressive compared to the rest of the SEC as well.
Yeah.
So that's the big concern about Florida that I have is, can they sustain whatever excellence they bring up at the beginning of the year? Can that be sustained into November? And Felipe Franks has got to be healthy. He cannot risk injury with him.
I totally agree with you on that. I think the X factor for this offense, you mentioned wide receivers, they got to find a way to get Kadarius Toney involved offensively.
Yeah.
He's just so explosive. He's got such great breakaway speed. Mm-hmm. He's electric. He can run the ball. He can catch it out of the backfield. I think he's that guy that you have to give him a number of touches per game and try to hit that number. The biggest concern I have is the offensive line. I mean, they're
it's not good
up front. It's going to be a growing process for them, and I know we're going to be previewing this Miami game in an upcoming podcast. This Miami game is going to be interesting to watch this front because they're not going to have a lot of room to grow. They start with Miami, and then 2 weeks later they go to Lexington, they play Kentucky, then they have Tennessee. So 3 out of their first 4 games, this offensive line is going to be in pretty big games right out the gate.
Yeah.
That's going to be somewhere that you got to watch for this team. Defensively, I like the pieces that this defense has, John. It's kind of weird that, you and I, when we think Florida, we always go to the romantic days of Spurrier and Warfel and Hilliard and then Urban Meyer and Tebow. Florida in the 2010s has been defense.
Yeah.
That has been what this program is. And Dan Mullen has done a good job of keeping this team's hat on defense. And this year looks to be a lot of the same.
I totally agree. And keeping Todd Grantham as defensive coordinator when he could have moved on to the NFL was big.
Yeah, it was huge. So looking at Florida, their schedule, we mentioned 3 out of the first 4, they got some big games. Then they got the Towson Tigers. Then they got Auburn Tigers. Tigers back-to-back. Those second Tigers are going to be a lot tougher, especially in October.
They got a Tiger threesome.
Yeah, then they go to Baton Rouge. You're right. A Tiger threesome right to start October off for them. This guy, when we talk SEC, we always talk about the schedules, and it's about who you get from the other division. I mean, really, when you break it down, it's about after the top teams, who are you pulling from the other division? And for Florida, you've got Auburn and LSU back-to-back. That's a big ask. That's a very big ask. And then you follow it up with a trip to South Carolina.
Who did Florida piss off?
Right. So looking at this schedule, John, 10 wins. If they go, let me ask you this. Last year they were 10-3.
Yeah, that's going to be hard.
Is 9 wins good enough? Or it's 8 wins where people panic? Would people be panicking over 8 wins, and is that fair?
They will be. I don't think it's fair because Florida kind of falls on the column of they're going to be a little better, but the record isn't going to indicate that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think that's going to be the case with Florida. You mentioned about the Triple Tigers that they face in midseason. Well, they got 4 Tigers on the schedule because Missouri is November 16th.
Yeah, later on, yeah. And they have to go to Columbia. They visit both Columbias this year.
Yeah.
One of them are easy to get a win in.
Our crack staff needs to research whether when a team has to go to Columbia, South Carolina, and Columbia, Missouri, what's the average record?
Yeah.
What do you think that is?
Oh, that's a good question. I can't give you a guesstimate off the top of my head, but that is a very good question. And, they've struggled with Missouri. Yeah. Oddly enough, since Missouri's joined the conference, Florida doesn't have a lot of luck with Missouri. I mean, they've lost the last 2 years in a row. Last year, they got spanked pretty badly at home. So that's a game, another one that you have to circle. I think 9-3 is a very good year for Florida, and with a chance to win 10 in a bowl. Depending on where they are health-wise, it's attainable. That Georgia game, everybody's going to circle. They're not ready for Georgia yet, John. They're not at that level. So I don't think that should be their barometer. I really think this stretch with Auburn, LSU, South Carolina, if they win all 3 of those, that's going to set them up for a fantastic year, regardless of what happens in Jacksonville.
But don't you get the feeling that when a head coach gets in his second year, there's always some kind of a fallback a little bit, at least in my experience, because now you're mixing the recruiting classes from Jim McElwain to Dan Mullen. There's always kind of a drop back in that second year. So I think Florida's in that column where they're going to be better, but the record is not going to indicate that.
Right. Well, let's move on. We talked earlier about the team Florida's been struggling with, so let's talk about them, Missouri. And, John, Missouri may be the most interesting team in preseason in the SEC. A lot of media love Missouri. Yeah. And it's hard not to love them when you look, they have 13 starters coming back.
Yeah.
Kelly Bryant comes over from Clemson.
To replace Drew Lock.
And we mentioned earlier, SEC scheduling is all about who you pull from the other division. Well, they pull Ole Miss and Arkansas, who are probably the 2 bottom cellar dwellers in the West. So if you were going to pull West teams, those would be the 2 you'd want. My question to you, John Wilkerson, is Missouri this year's Kentucky?
Yes, I do think so. Bill Shanks and I discussed that earlier. Who was the running back for Kentucky last year?
Benny Snell.
Benny Snell, thank you. That guy's name always escapes me. Benny Snell. Well, they've got Larry Roundtree is this year's version of Benny Snell. And that guy, as Bill and I talked about, I can't think of a top-line running back that has performed at Missouri probably since the mid-'70s when Tony Galbraith was their feature running back. I can't think of another running back that Mizzou has had in their stable that's been this talented as Larry Roundtree. And they're going to ride that horse throughout the year as Benny Snell was rode last year. I think there's a lot of things you got to like about this Mizzou team, not just the fact that Kelly Bryant comes in with the winning pedigree. That defense is kind of not known, but they performed really well toward the end of the season last year, and they've got 6 starters coming back.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things I like about this Mizzou team. I'm just wondering, is this going to resonate in Missouri? What are the crowds going to be like at Faurot Field? Because that's a hard fan base to please.
It is. And it's an odd stadium. It's a weird setup.
For someone who's been to games there before, you're right.
Yeah, it's 30 yards from the field, like you're way out there. It's an odd setup to get a big hostile crowd noise.
I know they're completing the end zone of Faurot Field.
They're losing the Rocks?
No, the other side. On the other side. The Rocks are still there.
Okay.
It's just, what kind of energy is there going to be at Faurot Field for this year? And then I look at that late October and early November schedule when you've got 3 road games at Vanderbilt, at Kentucky, at Georgia. That will kind of tell us what kind of team this Mizzou team is. If they can withstand that 2-1 even, they got a shot.
Yeah, I agree with you. You mentioned the defense. This defense is a lot of guys, but there are a lot of guys that play together, and they play as a unit. They're not gonna lead the conference in a lot of defensive stats, but they're gonna get the job done. They're gonna force some turnovers, and they can make plays when needed. The story with this team obviously is offense, and we can talk for days about the wide receivers. They got the best tight end in college football. I'm a big fan of Larry Roundtree. The story is, can Kelly Bryant live up to the expectation? I think this team is going to come and go as he comes and goes. If he lives up to the hype, they are set up for a breakout year. And if he struggles, I think this team might sputter. When you look at Missouri last year, 8-5 was their record. Looking at this schedule that you mentioned, you start off at Wyoming, which is odd that they're starting in Wyoming. But then they welcome in West Virginia. That should be a win. They have Southeast Missouri, South Carolina at home. That's where you really start the where your record's going to be game, because when you look at their schedule, South Carolina at home, at Kentucky October 26th, and then that stretch in November at Georgia, Florida, Tennessee at home. Those games right there, those 5 games are going to make and break what they are.
Right.
If they struggle at quarterback, they're a 7-5 football team from that stretch. But if he can play well, I think the ceiling for this team is probably, I would say they're probably 9-3, but if Kelly Bryant lives up to the hype, they could be 10-2. I mean, this schedule can set up for them to be a 10-2 team.
The one game on their schedule that scares me, if you're a Mizzou fan, is that last game of the year at Arkansas. And the reason why is it's a rivalry now. They play for a trophy, but that game will be in Little Rock. And this will be the last game in Little Rock for the foreseeable future, at least 2 years. That's going to be an emotional pit on the day after Thanksgiving. Razorback fans like myself know that strange things have happened in Little Rock. A lot of great moments for Razorback football have happened in Little Rock. And that's the one game that I think, if I'm a Mizzou fan, I circle on my calendar as a concern. Even though Arkansas is going to be probably a 4-win team, but that's the one game that I would be concerned with.
No, you're 100% correct. Arkansas always ended the season until recently with LSU, and a lot of the previous coaches, Bobby Petrino, Brett Bielema, really started their run at Arkansas with an upset win over LSU in Little Rock. I can vividly remember the 2008 game where LSU went to Little Rock, and LSU was top 10 team. I think they were 9-2. Here comes 3-8 Arkansas, and Bobby Petrino beats LSU, and it really catapulted his run at Arkansas and got him going. So strange things happen in Little Rock, like you say. You got to watch that game, but I do think that this team is 10-2 to 7-5 is kind of their scale.
Right. I'll agree with that.
I would say they're probably in the middle of it, 9-3, but if Kelly Bryant takes off, 10-2 is a possibility, and that'd be a huge year for Barry Odom. Let's move on to South Carolina, who, when you look at their roster, John, they're not very far behind Missouri. They have some talent. There's a lot of things to work with. Jake Bentley back at quarterback. But, dear God, their schedule. This schedule is going to make it really hard to see any improvement in South Carolina, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think a boost for them has been Tavion Feaster coming over from Clemson. I think that's going to be an upgrade to the running backs. But you're right about this schedule. I mean, it's just brutal. You open up against North Carolina and Charlotte, and North Carolina is a crapshoot. And then after a win over Charleston Southern. Alabama, hosting Alabama, at Missouri, Kentucky, at Georgia, Florida, at Tennessee. That's a death march right there.
Yeah.
And then you close at Texas A&M and hosting the defending national champion Clemson Tigers in one of the most petty rivalries in college football. You know, I see 6 wins when I look at that schedule, and that's almost perhaps where they're going to be. I mean, I don't see how they can bust through the ceiling for any more because they're going to be totally spent by the time they get to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, last year they were 6-6 regular season, got 7 wins with a bowl. They're probably looking at the same again, which is kind of sad because I do think that they are going to be better in a lot of ways. I love their front seven. To me, Javon Kinlaw was one of my favorite players to watch play football. I just love the way he disrupts that defensive line. They've got some great players in the linebacking core. Their secondary worries me a little bit. They can get beat on the big play. But they're fair. They can hang into games. The question is, can they run the football? Jake Bentley has been asked to do way too much in his time at South Carolina.
There's where Tavion Feaster is going to help out.
Yeah, Tavion Feaster, I feel bad for him because there's so much expectation on him in Columbia, but it's warranted. I mean, he has to come through for this team. If he doesn't, it's going to be another year of Jake running for his life. This offensive line, again, they're trying to grow. They're patchworking a little bit, trying to put some new pieces in. Yeah. And at wide receiver, they've got some players, but Jake Bentley can't be having 40 pass attempts a game. They just have not had a running game. Tavion Feaster is going to be the key, but even if they're better, it's just hard to look at this schedule. I mean, North Carolina, as you said, they should win that game, but that's not a give-me.
Tar Heels are a crapshoot.
Yeah, you don't know what they're going to be. And then Charleston Southern, and then Alabama, at Missouri, Kentucky, bye week, at Georgia, Florida at home, at Tennessee, Vanderbilt. That is tough.
App State.
That is tough. And then you have App State, who you're probably going to beat, but will give you everything you want from that game. It will not be an easy win.
But like I say, Carolina might be wounded by then.
Yeah.
With that stretch of games.
And that's what worries me about Will Muschamp. I think this team – at 6-6, fans are going to grumble a little bit. I think that's an accomplishment. I really do. I think this team should be proud of 6-6 because looking at this, John, if it goes off the rails, it could go off the rails.
Yeah,
I mean, it could be. There's 8 losses here.
It's a free fall.
Yes. At worst, if things fall apart, you can find 8 losses on the schedule. So this is going to be a hard year for Will Muschamp despite improvement.
Do you think his backside will be a little warm after the season if it does free fall?
Well, you know what's weird about that is it seems like 6-6 would put some heat on him, which I don't think is warranted.
I totally agree.
I feel like 6 or 7 wins every year should give you a mulligan at South Carolina, and the fans don't believe that. The fans are thriving for that Steve Spurrier early 2010s run that I just don't think is realistic in today's SEC East.
And it doesn't help either when your in-state rival from the ACC is winning national championships.
Right, and they're one of the most dominant teams in college football. So a better team, I think, in some spots.
Yeah.
Brutal schedule, which could be a recipe for disaster for them.
So you put them in the column with Florida as the record won't indicate how much the improvement of that team?
I do, but I also think that their crash and burn could be a lot worse than Florida due to the schedule. The talent level at South Carolina is good. It's not better than the other teams enough to where if they get down or they get injured that they won't go into a tailspin. So keep an eye on South Carolina. This could be an interesting year for them if things go south. Let's go to Tennessee now, another team that's trying to get better despite what their record may be. I love what Jeremy Pruitt's done this offseason. I think Jeremy Pruitt did a great thing getting Jim Chaney in as offense coordinator.
I do too.
Somebody that fits his philosophy of college football, fits what he wants to do. Mm-hmm. What he wants to do is run the ball. And last year, Ty Chandler kind of stepped up and was an unsung hero for this team, John. Do you feel like, what do you think this offense is going to look like with Jim Chaney? Do you think Ty Chandler could become more of a household name due to the style of offense they play?
I do, and I think Tim Jordan is going to be a nice little complimentary piece as well. Tennessee is going to remind me a lot of the Arkansas teams that Jim Chaney had earlier in the decade, using those running backs and a lot of play action. I think it's going to be more of a run heavy offense. I think the tight end will be more involved this year, and I think Garantano. I think a lot of pressure has been relieved from his shoulders now with Jim Chaney kind of guiding things. And, I keep reading good things about how he's performing in scrimmages and during the spring. I think he's not going to have a breakout year, but he's going to have an improvement. And I think the Tennessee Vols will have an improvement as well. 8 wins is not unreasonable for this program. They still got a ways to go. And I think Jeremy Pruitt is doing a good job of trying to upgrade that talent in Knoxville. And, it's really hard to do that. You've got to rely on out-of-state 4 or 5 stars to be able to make the commitment to Tennessee. But I really think that 8 wins is pretty reasonable.
Hey, you bring up Jarrett Garantano. He is an interesting case to me because – a lot of people have soured on him because of what they've seen so far, but look back at his path to where he's got to where he is now. He came out, New Jersey kid, highly recruited, St. John Bosco, played really well, went to a lot of the camps, and done good, stood up well against the other elite quarterbacks in his class. Yeah. And then he goes to Tennessee, gets with Butch Jones. Butch Jones' last season. He comes out. I'll give you a great example. Tuscaloosa, Alabama, late October, his freshman year. He's a true freshman. They throw him on the field because they had some injuries at quarterback.
I remember that game.
And he got absolutely battered in that game. And I remember watching that game, and I was watching it with my brother, and I told him, this game is going to set his development back about 1.5 years because he got just absolutely walloped in that game. Yeah. But he kept fighting and he kept getting up and he showed his grittiness. And that's the thing about him. When you think about him, you think gritty, but there's talent there that I don't think people give credit to. He showed flashes last year. I thought his performance at Auburn last year, he really shown what he can be when the offense is clicking.
What I like about Jarrett Garantano is he doesn't make mistakes.
Yeah. He's smart. That Florida game last year was really another one of those games where there's a lot of hype, and Florida just got onto him so quick that he had no chance to catch his breath. Mm-hmm. But there were spots when you watched him last year, again, at Auburn, that was one of the games that stood out to me as this guy has the development to be a good quarterback. I'm interested to see what Jim Chaney does with him as well. I think if they can get a running game and Chaney can kind of QB whisper to Garantano, this offense can kind of turn around. You said 8 wins. It's going to be tough when you look at their schedule. They'll be 3-0, and then they go to the Swamp. That's a loss. I don't think they're ready for that yet. And then they're going to lose to Georgia, so they're going to be 3-2 right away. Can they turn it around? Can they beat Mississippi State? Then they go to Alabama, another loss. But can they bounce back from that and beat South Carolina? If they can not let the losses hang in their minds, I think this could be a 7-5 team, 8-4 if it goes at best. But other than Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Missouri, I would say are losses. At Missouri is a big reason why.
Right.
After that, though, these are winnable games. And if you get to 8-4, that's a fantastic year, too, for Jeremy Pruitt. I think 7-5 is realistic, but 8-4 is achievable.
And that just further enhances the foundation he's trying to build in Knoxville. And, Tennessee's a program I want to see back on top. They've been down too long. We need to see them challenging Alabama in the title games now. We need to. I want to see that yin and yang between those two again.
Yeah, we need that rivalry back.
Yeah, we do. I mean, the third Saturday in October needs to matter again.
Yes, it does. Well, let's move on to the team that was everybody's darling last year, Kentucky. Interesting stat about Mark Stoops at Kentucky. Every year that he's been at Kentucky, the last 5 years, his team has not had more losses than the previous year. They've improved. Every single season, they get more wins. John, I think that's going to be broken this year.
Yeah, that's going to be broken this year.
I don't see them doing better than 10-3.
I don't either. Terry Wilson was a pretty he was a serviceable quarterback, but I think Benny Snell kind of put a blanket over some of the deficiencies he had at quarterback. And I think that's going to be noticed right off the bat when they play Toledo on August 31st. Just way too many talent losses. Benny Snell's gone. Josh Allen is gone. You only returned 4 on your defense. I thought it was a really good defense last year.
Oh, yeah. It's so physical last year.
Yeah, they're still going to be physical. They just don't have, the talent and the depth they've had. And I'm sure some of these guys will develop. But 6 wins to me is probably where this team is, maximum. And this is kind of a transition year for Kentucky. This program, it seems like there's 1, maybe 2 years where they kind of take notice. I remember the Kentucky teams of the mid-2000s that kind of ascended and then descended toward the end of the year. And that Kentucky team last year kind of followed the pattern of what the Kentucky program does historically, where by November people are talking about them, and last year they kind of bucked the trend with a 3-game winning streak at the end and a bowl game, including the bowl game against Penn State. But I think we're seeing a Kentucky team in transition, kind of descending this year. They'll sneak into a bowl. They're building toward 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, this team last year, they were so physical. They played teams in the trenches and beat them down like a traditional SEC power would. Tennessee and Florida in a lot of ways were envious of how physical this Kentucky team was in the trenches. Mm-hmm. But a lot of those guys are gone. I do think you have some talent on defense. I like Cash Daniel at middle linebacker. He's fun to watch, and it's fun to say Cash Daniel. But he's going to be their leader on defense. Yes. He's kind of their quarterback in that linebacking core. It's going to be really important for him early on to get comfortable calling plays and getting that line set, because there's going to be a lot of new guys out there. There's a lot of new faces that they have to get used to, adjusted to playing in this defense. Offensively, Benny Snell, to me, the offense stopped and goed with Benny Snell. He was the guy, along with that offensive line that was very underrated, by the way. Terry Wilson, I wasn't a big fan of, if I'm being honest. I thought Terry Wilson came through with his legs a lot, right. But I think Benny Snell masked a lot of his deficiencies.
As I said at the top,
Eddie Gran is going to have a very hard job as offense coordinator adapting and molding this offense to Terry Wilson's skill set, because I don't know if they have the pieces around Terry Wilson to play to his strengths, and I don't think he has the talent to play to what Kentucky's strengths have been on offense. So I think they're going to struggle scoring some points.
1 returning starter on the wide receiver group.
Yep.
No returning starters on a running back.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think Terry Wilson got some growing up to do, in my opinion. You can't win it with your legs.
Yeah.
And he's got no safety valve behind him.
Well, they got to
I got the same feeling you've got.
They got to take the wins where they come. They're going to be 2-0 to start the year, and then they got Florida at Mississippi State, out South Carolina. They at least got to go 1-2 in that stretch, and I think that's possible. 0-3 is a possibility, but I think 1-2 is probably more likely. And then they have bye week, Arkansas at home, at Georgia, Missouri. You're probably going to beat Arkansas, and you're probably going to lose the next 2. So then it all comes down to those final games right at the end of the season. Tennessee at Vandy. You got UT Martin, and then you play Louisville. This is a bowl team. I think this is a 6-win team. I think 7 wins is very possible. Anything above 7 wins, to me, I would be surprised.
I agree. I think 6 is kind of the ceiling for Kentucky, and they're building toward the next few years.
All right, well, let's end out our East discussion with Vanderbilt and Derek Mason, who, again, keeps trying to get respect down there in Vandy. Under the radar each season, getting better. John, sidebar real quick.
Sure.
When Derek Mason took the job at Vanderbilt, I was not a fan. I'll just be honest. 2014.
Right.
James Franklin had brought that program to heights we had not
10
seen
wins
ever. And here comes Derek Mason taking over year 1. They have a Thursday night game. Temple's coming to town, and Temple blew them out, 37-7.
I remember
they
that.
were one of the most dysfunction-looking football teams I've ever seen. And the next day, and I was knee-jerk reaction the next day, I said they made a mistake. This guy's never going to work. He has found his footing, I would say, at Vanderbilt. They are the more realistic version of what Vanderbilt's going to be, which is fighting for 6 wins every year. Mm-hmm. And he has a solid footing with this team. Now, they lose some talent on this offense especially, but they've got some players. Keyshawn Vaughn might be the best running back you've never heard of.
I agree.
Kalijah Lipscomb, same way. One of the most reliable receivers in the SEC. If they could find a quarterback consistent play, and could this team offensively give some of these defenses problems in the East?
I think so, but again, it depends on who is under center at quarterback. Is it Riley Neal or Deuce Wallace? I mean, who can develop their talents to where guys like Keyshawn Vaughn and Kalijah Lipscomb and that whole wide receiver group that when you look at them on paper are pretty impressive. The offensive line is got to replace 3 starters. That's the one thing about Vanderbilt, though, you could always count on is that line play has always been spot on both sides of the ball. I'm like you with Derek Mason. I was not really all that crazy about that hire and wondering what the heck's going on here. But, he's found his niche with getting the 2 stars and the 3 stars that kind of fall into the cracks. Getting them into school and developing those guys. So they're the team that nobody wants to play. Even if you do get a win, you feel beat up. You don't feel good about it. You kind of feel like you should have put more points on the board. They're going to have to be satisfied to being that team again because 6 wins is going to be extremely tough. When you open against Georgia, then go to Purdue, and then host LSU.
I mean, they could be 0-3, right?
They could be 0-3 off the bat. Northern Illinois isn't going to be an easy game either, and then Ole Miss is could go either way. So you're looking at possibly a 2-3 start before you play UNLV, and then look at those road games against South Carolina and Florida, and then you close at Tennessee. I mean. You kind of get the feeling 5 wins is probably the max for them. Yeah. 6 they may be able to sneak 6 wins in. I'm interested to see how that offense develops.
Yes,
because they've got outstanding skill players. Who's going to get them the ball?
This has been the story with Vanderbilt. The last couple of years it's been defense, and they've always been so physical on defense. Defensively, they've been carried to wins that maybe they shouldn't get in October and November in past seasons. This isn't going to be the case this year. This year it's going to be the offense that has to carry this team. And they have the players, like you say, in set. They have a good offensive line, too.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got some guys that are pretty athletic and a couple of guys, 1 or 2, that might find themselves on the Sunday roster. So there's some talent on this offense. It's all about the quarterback position. And I'm a little biased. I really want to see Deuce Wallace quarterback this team because Riley Neal, to me, is the more steady hand, whereas Deuce Wallace is the more electric guy. I remember watching him in high school at Sevier County. I went and saw him play live twice, and even then, just his electric ability, he would make a mistake or two, and you'd say, oh, man, I don't know if this kid has what it takes to be a college football player. And then the next play, he's taking a sweep 70 yards, and you're like, there's that athletic ability. He's got the talent, but can he get it right between the ears to lead this offense?
Right.
I think that's their X factor because I think they need an electric quarterback to placate to these wide receivers and to help Keyshawn Vaughn offset the running game. Looking at this schedule, you're right. I mean, 4-8, it's kind of stared them in the face. I think if this quarterback position can be settled and help lead this team, I think 6 wins is doable, but it ain't going to be easy.
Keep Keyshawn Vaughn healthy.
Yes, absolutely. All right, John. Well, I think we have broken down the SEC East about as well as we can. So let's take a quick break, catch our breath. Coming back, let's go west, young man.
And before we go west, Anthony and I, we are huge SEC fans, and we attend games regularly. When we do, we're going to go online and go to SeatGiant.com. And if you type in SDH on checkout, it'll help you and it'll help us at SeatGiant.com.
And welcome back to the College Football Debrief. We're previewing the SEC. We just broke down the East. Now we're going to the West. We like to go preseason top to bottom, so starting at the top.
Well, before we start, let's tell the masses out there that the SEC West is a bone of contention between Anthony and I because we both like a team whose color scheme is red and white and starts with A. Now, if we had a phone line to our fans, we would make a contest out of it to see which one of us likes a certain team, as we're giving you that hint. We don't have that, nor any prizes to give away. Well, maybe Anthony could give you away a T-shirt of some kind. I don't know.
The one I'm wearing.
But Anthony's an Alabama guy. I'm an Arkansas guy. So there you go. There's the mystery solved.
Yep, and our team's booking the conference or booking the division.
Exactly.
So we'll start with my team.
Ouch!
Let's start with Alabama.
That hurt, pal.
Well,
that hurt.
You know, the truth hurts, man. Alabama. This is the most interesting offseason I think Nick Saban's had in his coaching career. This team, John, if you listen to the media, they went 3-9 last year. I mean, they were horrible. They have undefeated. No chance. Saban's done. Put a fork in him.
Or 14-1.
I mean, this team had a terrible year last year by the media stuff, and I cannot wait to see mentally what this team looks like after this entire offseason. Do you think that this is going to be a continuation of what we saw from Clemson and that the mental mindset has crumbled, or do you think that the big bad dog is angry now and all the other dogs in the yard better look at it?
I'm going with the latter because when you have the mastermind of Nick Saban, I mean, he is the master motivator. I've never seen, in all the years I've covered college football, I've never seen the type of impact that Nick Saban has had on a program and with 18 to 21-year-old boys to men as Nick Saban has. I mean, and a lot of it is how he recruits and who he goes after. And he's a brand. People come to him. He doesn't have to go to them. But the dog has been pissed off, and fangs are showing. And let's stop this whole myth about the changeover of coaching staffs. To me, that is so overhyped and such BS because they're all coming to please him.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different ball of wax than if he's just having to go and find guys to buy into him.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that. So that whole thing, that mess that they compared them with Clemson as far as continuity and coaching staff, that's just total BS to me. But, look, Alabama still has some of the best players in the country.
Oh, yeah.
They're coachable. I think it was an aberration to me how the national title game, the outcome of that one. And I feel sorry for the 12 opponents that Alabama's going to go up against.
I got a good quick story for you. So at SEC Media Days, Nick Saban was on the podium in the main room. He's talking about, the season. People keep asking about the Clemson game, and I'm not going to name the coach, but an SEC coach is waiting on the side. He's waiting to go up, take his turn on the podium, and he looks over and he says, "Oh, my God, I wish they'd stop asking him this. Does the media know what they're doing to the people that have to play him?"
Yeah.
And that's kind of what the message is to the other teams of stop asking about Clemson because it's going to be punished on us before they get to them. This team, to me, John, is very exciting.
You're not biased, are you?
No. I mean, look, I am a fan, but even if I'm not a fan, if you just look at this team, how can you not be excited about this offense? Tua Tagovailoa's lost 15 pounds. He looks great right now. It's Najee Harris's turn at running back. We know they have the best receiving core in college football. Their offensive line averages 6'6", 320 pounds. So they're not little guys. Defensively is very interesting for them. They are a little thin at linebacker, and that's kind of been the case with them the last couple of years. But, they had a couple of transfers in the offseason, Anoma leaving, going to Houston. Hurts them a little bit in depth. They've had some injuries, but if they can stay healthy, this front seven could be getting back to what we've seen where they just terrorize on the pass rush. And I'm really excited about the secondary because you talk about the anomaly of the Clemson game. You don't think the secondary has had to hear it all offseason?
Yeah.
And they're all coming back, and they're all healthy. They were all so young
Trayvon
last year.
Diggs, Patrick Surtain, Xavier McKinney. I mean, those are horses back there.
Yeah, well, and then they play so many guys. I mean, Shaheem Carter's another one that can step up on his day, make a big impact. So they've got guys who are going to be able to play, not to mention all the recruits that they're bringing in. This, again, the same thing with Georgia. Like, you can sit – there's no point in talking the roster because we know how good they are. So let's go right to the schedule. And they start off with Duke and Atlanta.
Win.
I feel really bad for Coach Cutt. New Mexico State.
Win.
At South Carolina.
Win.
Southern Miss.
Win.
Ole Miss.
Win.
Bye week. At Texas A&M. That's going to be the first time, and there'll be some storylines here and there, but that's really the first test for them.
Mm-hmm.
They once again, and I know this ticks a lot of people off, they get lucky on the SEC East draw yet again. They get South Carolina and Tennessee from the other division. So looking at the schedule, after Texas A&M, Tennessee, Arkansas, then they had the bye week, LSU, at Mississippi State, Western Carolina,
big win,
at Auburn.
Win.
Is there a regular season loss here?
The only one I see is Texas A&M, to be honest with you.
I'll be honest with you. I think they're unbeaten going into Auburn. And depending on where Auburn is. I didn't say they're going to
lose to Texas A&M.
Okay.
I just thought I could see a loss there.
I think they're unbeaten going to Jordan-Hare. And if they lose in the regular season, it would be that game, and we'll see where Auburn is because Auburn has a massive scale of what they could be this year. We'll talk about it in a minute. I'm not going to get bogged down, but that's the one to me. So, again, I think, I hate to say it, spoiler alert, I think Alabama and Georgia yet again are going to be in Atlanta.
Okay, so we're talking West. Here's an observation I have for this division as we plow through. Don't mean to bog us down, but this is an observation because you've got the top four in the SEC West, and Alabama is clearly the big dog in that. Then you got the up-and-coming team with a huge bullet, and that's Texas A&M.
Yep.
And then you've got Auburn, which is a total mystery. Could go really great or could just free fall into oblivion. And then you got LSU, which is another mystery because probably talent-wise they're okay. They're not the LSU you would expect, and we'll break them down here in a minute. But they've got some intangibles there that I've never seen in an LSU team before, and I love the fact that they called upon John Robinson to come in and look at their offense. I can't think of a better offensive mind that's out there who did it on the collegiate level and on the professional level as someone like John Robinson to kind of consult on your offense. I think they've done all the right things, but didn't mean to bog us down there. But there was some big picture observations I've made of the West.
Absolutely. Well, let's go to LSU. I mean, let's talk about the Tigers next. LSU last year, they were ready to fire Ed Orgeron before the season started. I mean, he was on the hot seat before they kicked the ball. They get Miami in the big game, to start the year on a Sunday, and they get the ball rolling from there, John. I mean, they beat Miami, and after that, they had a great start to the year. Really surprised a lot of people, I think, how good this team was. Surprised me because I was ready to write them off, and I underestimated the amount of talent that they had on that team. I thought coaching would bog them down. That did not happen. And you got to give credit where it's due because they worked with what they had on offense. They got every ounce out of quarterback at Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
They got every ounce out of their wide receiver play. This team really, really surprised me in how good they were. They were 10-3. Now they have expectation. Now people have them as a preseason top 10, and you're not surprising anyone anymore.
No.
So is this LSU team, was last year the new norm for LSU?
All right, you just rattled off a lot of things about LSU last year. And what's the common theme there? The team had heart.
Yeah.
The team had passion. Okay, I've been watching SEC football for years, and I've never seen an LSU team with that kind of heart and passion before, and that team had it, and that's going to be a carryover into this year. And I think we're going to see that in the Georgia Southern game. And I think we're going to see it in that Texas game. They're going to Austin, Texas, and that's a rare meeting between two giants.
Massive game.
And I think that's going to be not necessarily the watershed of the year, but if they get that win, now we're talking about a team that's going to go places.
Yeah.
Because now you got Northwestern State, you got Vanderbilt, you got Utah State before you hit Florida. So that's, if they get by Texas, that is a massive start for LSU. And intangibles. I brought that up about LSU. Joe Burrow, to me, is probably not the most gifted quarterback out there, but the man just makes plays.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. He's so funny because Joe Burrow, everyone loves Joe Burrow, and they love to talk about how great he is and put him on preseason lists. And this is no knock on Joe Burrow, but if you love Joe Burrow, then don't look at his stats.
No.
Because his stats are not pretty, and that's me being nice. But when it matters, he makes drives. He makes drives happen. He makes plays. Mm-hmm. You got to give him credit where it's due. I can't wait to see John Emery, the true freshman running back, come in. This is John Emery's chance. John Emery, to me, ceiling-wise, could be what Leonard Fournette was for this.
Yeah, he could be dominant.
He could be that, and they need him to be that. They've got the weapons at wide receiver. Jamar Chase is a big threat waiting to happen.
Justin Jefferson isn't bad either.
Absolutely. Well, and Derek Dillon is your, move the sticks guy. They've got weapons everywhere. Offensive line, got some players there, breaking some new guys in, but got some leadership there they can lean on. Defensively, again, what do you say? They're going to be good on defense. I do want to say real quick, though, there's a name I want you to circle. Okay. Circle it, highlight it, write it down. If he can stay healthy right now, keep an eye on Clavon Chason. If he stays healthy, remember that name. He will be a first-team All-SEC member. This guy is a sack waiting to happen every snap. He's unblockable. He has been tearing it up in Baton Rouge all camp. Nobody can touch this guy. That is a name to remember. Number 4, Clavon Chason. Great Cajun name, even better football player, John.
Do you think he and Ed Orgeron have their own language?
I'm not touching that with a 10. So looking at this team, they got Grant Delpit back at safety. I mean, this team has got talent. We know they have talent. So is it just to chalk it up as another 9 to 10 win season and move on? Or do you think that there's a bigger ceiling or potential a lower valley for them?
I think 10 wins is where they're going to be. I don't know with Alabama and A&M on their schedule if the next step is possible. If they can get by one of those teams, and I'm looking at that game in Tuscaloosa on November 9th, I want to see where LSU is after the Florida, Mississippi State, Auburn stretch when they play Alabama. Because last year when they played Alabama, they'd had one loss already to Florida. And there was so much hype going to that game in Baton Rouge. And what happened?
Yeah. Right. No, absolutely.
Now they're the road team, and they're facing the best team in the conference. To me, that's if they get that win, now they're pretty special. But 10 wins isn't bad.
No,
not for this team.
Not at all.
And they'll get a good bowl. So I think 10 wins is probably where they're going to be. Possible 11, but they're not going to win the West.
I think 8-4 to 10-2 is kind of the slide I'd give them, and I'm going to call it right in the middle. I'm going to say they're 9-3, maybe 10 wins with a bowl. I think finding more than 10 wins is going to be really difficult unless somebody becomes a superstar. If John Emery is that breakout superstar running back, if they take the next step with Joe Burrow at quarterback, that's the only way I think you find more than 10. But I think 9-3 is probably what we're looking at.
Now, they're selling alcohol this year at Tiger Stadium.
Yeah, that's going to be really dangerous. It's going to be really dangerous. We should do a whole podcast on that. That is – I don't even know what to say with that.
What do you think the opening game at Tiger Stadium against Georgia Southern is going to be like?
Well, I hope it's a night game. I'm about to say, I'm sure it'll be a night game. So, yeah, Georgia Southern's never going to see anything like that ever again, I can promise you. Let's go on now to the team everybody's been loving to talk about, Texas A&M. They are the ones people cannot wait to see this Aggie team play football, John Wilkerson. Now, here's the thing about Texas A&M, John. We talked about this in, our Programs on the Rise podcast earlier in the summer. A lot of people are putting them as a dark horse playoff team. And I think
I was one of them.
I think that is, good when you look at their roster. However, they have the toughest schedule to me in all of college football. There is no way in hell this team is winning more than 10 games in the regular season. So I'm going to start off with a curveball for you on Texas A&M.
All right.
Am I wrong in saying that this team has the best chance of being a 2-loss team in the college football playoff because of their schedule?
I do. I think if they can get it done, and if they have 2 losses, and let's say they get into the title game and lose, and that's their second loss, they're in, and they set that precedent. But you're right about their schedule. The thing I've always said that I liked about Texas A&M is they're the only team in the country that has Clemson and Alabama on their schedule. So
and Georgia.
And Georgia. That's true. That September 7th game against Clemson is huge, and they could get it done. It's early enough in the season where you're not in the grind, and it's going to be very hyped, and they're better than they were last year when they played Clemson. And then, I think the Arkansas game is going to be tough. Now we'll talk about Arkansas a little later as to reasons why. But they host Alabama. And look, I've been to Kyle Field. It's to me, it's the best atmosphere in college football. I'm looking forward to seeing that place rocking. I'm sure that's going to be the 3:30 game on CBS.
Oh, yeah.
After that finish at Georgia and LSU is a challenge.
Yeah.
So they have an opportunity. They're getting Clemson, I think, at a good time in the season. They host Alabama. 2 major hurdles that they could possibly jump over. And, of course, it's the other schools they got to get by. Auburn and South Carolina and Mississippi State and Ole Miss. But that finish is kind of tough. To me, we talk about how tough the schedule is when you got to go to Athens, Georgia, and then the next week go to Baton Rouge. That's tough.
You're going to 2 of the toughest environments in the country back-to-back weeks. That's brutal. And, South Carolina is the other team everybody talks about with the hardest schedule in college football. South Carolina also plays the big 3 of Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia. However, they have only one of those games on the road.
Right.
Texas A&M has to go to Clemson and to Georgia, and they have to go to Baton Rouge following week. So to me, this is the toughest schedule in college football without question.
But don't you think the A&M, the talent level is a lot better than South Carolina's? That's the thing about A&M.
When you look at their depth chart, you want to put them as that dark horse team. Kellen Mond, the year he had last year, if he grows just a little bit more, he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the conference, without a doubt. And it's going to have NFL scouts looking at him. The job Jimbo did making him I don't want to say elite, but a above average last year college football quarterback was fantastic, and he's got room to grow. You look at this offense, they've got players. Jamon Osborne is a great wide receiver. Kendrick Rogers is uncoverable. Mm-hmm. When you throw one-on-one balls, good luck. You can't out-jump Kendrick Rogers. And I think Deshaun Corbin, the running back, is one of the more underrated tailbacks in the conference. Corbin's just kind of a guy that gets 80 to 120 yards a game that nobody talks about.
Then you got Cordarian Richardson
as
a compliment.
Yes, and another guy
from UCF.
This guy's not going to play very much, but when he comes in goal line packages, keep an eye on Vernon Jackson. This guy's a load. He is a freight train when he runs through the hole. Mm-hmm. He played small high school football. I think he was 2A. He played both ways. He was a defensive end and a running back, and he sometimes played quarterback. When this guy gets a head full of steam, good luck tackling him. He'll be a guy to watch on goal line situations. But the other thing about Texas A&M that excites me is we can be excited about this defense.
Yeah.
This defense finally has some guys that you can look at and say that's a guy that's going to play on Sundays. And it all starts up front with Bobby Brown. Look out, Whitney, leading down that defensive front. This defense, John, looks like an SEC defense, and I think that's another way they can be excited. I mean, again, is it all about the schedule with them? Is that what their hang-up is?
I think so. But I think they're in every one of those games.
Yeah, I do too.
To me, that makes a big difference, especially with the radical momentum swings you have in college football. You mentioned that defense. Mike Elko, to me, is if he's not the top defensive coordinator in the country, it's a very short list.
Absolutely. How is he not a head coach yet?
I agree. I mean, his time is coming.
Yeah. And let's make that call right now. Come December, we're going to be talking about Mike Elko popping up at a job somewhere.
So he'll be our Scott Satterfield this year.
He's the best defensive mind to me around right now that's not named Nick Saban. Looking at the schedule, I'm going to use this as a segue. You mentioned where they get Clemson. Texas A&M gets Clemson on the road second week of the year. You said they catch them at a good time. I agree with you. I think they catch them at a good time. I also think they catch Auburn at a good time.
Yeah.
I think getting Auburn week 4 with a young team still trying to figure out what they're going to be, what their identity is, I think if you're going to get Auburn, you want to get them early. And I think getting them early is a –
and it's in College Station?
Yes. That's a feather in a cap for A&M. So let's talk Auburn. Auburn is the most interesting team in college football. They're like the Dos Equis guy of college football. They can be just about anything this year. They can be a disaster. They can be a dark horse SEC West contender. They have such a big scale of where they are, and it all lives and dies at the quarterback spot.
Yeah, all right. To me, Auburn has got superior talent. Okay, now you've got a head coach that not very popular. Can we say that among the fan base? And probably among the donor class as well. All right, so you've got that. Now you've got 2 quarterbacks that are freshmen coming in, and one of those freshmen is a legacy in Bo Nix.
Yep.
And then you got Joey Gatewood. And as we're taping this right now, and probably when we drop this, I don't think a decision has been made. I know Gus Malzahn wants to make some kind of decision before the Oregon game. And oh my, what a way to open the season.
Oh, yes. What a game.
Going to Arlington, Texas to play Oregon, who will have the entire Pac-12 conference on its shoulders to improve that brand.
Yep.
That Washington was supposed to do last year against Auburn.
Yeah. It's like the same game. Changed the
exactly.
Team. Same game as last year.
Some team from the Pacific Northwest is now going to, and that team is Oregon. To me, the way things are adding up right now for Auburn, I would be extremely nervous if I'm an Auburn fan.
I don't know where to read this team.
I don't either.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, and I'm an Alabama fan. I full disclosure, I'm an Alabama fan. But I can watch football without bias and enjoy good football. I can't wait to watch this team. Because defensively, they don't take a backseat to anybody.
No, they don't.
Throw them in
that
there with
front
Alabama,
7?
with Clemson. They don't take a backseat to anybody. Now, I will be honest, I'm not as sold to their secondary as a lot of people are. I think they have some good players. I like Javaris Davis especially, but I do think that there's some big plays that can be made in that secondary. They worry me a little bit in man coverage. That front 7, though, is killer.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Let me tell you something about Gus Malzahn. When Gus Malzahn has done well at Auburn, it's been when he has a veteran offensive line. And that's what he's got this year.
Right.
When he has a veteran O-line, that's when he does his magic. And He's already got that base laid. I do think it's going to be interesting because we've always heard this debate. John Nelson, and I say this out of love, has been one of them that, when Gus Malzahn calls play, when Auburn does a bad play, Gus called it. When it's a good play, the OC called it. Well, he's calling all the plays this year.
I was going to say.
Now it's time for the chickens to come to roost. Is Gus a bad play caller? We will know because he is the guy this year. Wide receiver-wise, they've got so much talent. They're so athletic. Boobie Whitlow has the ability to step up and be that Trey Mason type of running back, carry this offense, especially late in the season. It's all about quarterback. And it's so interesting at quarterback because you got a guy in Joey Gatewood who was a highly touted quarterback coming out of high school. Florida kid, Central Florida, spread guy, played a lot of spread, can run, but he's more of a quick read guy, a lot of slant patterns. Been in this system, redshirted last year, knows the offense. And then you got Bo Nix, who is Patrick Nix, his son, former Auburn quarterback in the 90s. Mm-hmm. I want to tell you a little bit about Bo Nix. So Patrick Nix, for those of y'all that don't know, Patrick Nix he's a Terry Bowden quarterback for Auburn in the mid-90s. Terry Bowden had a great start. 93 was unbeaten. 94 was nine wins, 1 loss, 1 draw. Patrick was a quarterback for 94. Patrick Nix is loved in the probation years. Patrick Nix is loved in Auburn. He's an Auburn folk hero.
He can walk on water.
And he's that guy, John, that speaks soft and carries a big stick.
Yeah.
He's very quiet. He's a very soft-spoken, great guy, really good guy. But he just doesn't have a lot of outlandish personality. His son is the complete opposite. Bo Nix is brash. He's loud. He's flamboyant. And I love it. I love watching Bo Nix play football. I watched him his last 2 years. I saw him as a junior play live, and I saw him as a senior play live. And he's waving on the crowd. He's running his mouth. He's getting his team hyped up. I mean, he is Baker Mayfield personality. And I think this offense might need that. I think he could bring little extra gear to this team. He's got the talent, man. He is a dual threat guy. He can run. I don't love his throwing motion for a Sunday team, but for college level, he's got a great arm for college football. I want to see it be Bo Nix. I don't know if it will be, but I want to see it be Bo Nix because, again, the ceiling for what he can do is so high. So high. Now, Auburn fans think that he's going to be the white Cam Newton. I don't think you can go that far, but I do think that his ceiling is very, very high. And if he can reach that ceiling, that November 30th game could be for the West.
Yeah.
They're good enough. They're good enough everywhere else. However, they could also be 6-6 and be looking for a new coach. I just don't know where to pick them. You pick them because I don't know where to put them.
Well, see, I'm the same way, too. I'm like spin a wheel and see where it lands. It could land on 2-9 for all we know. Again, it's all on the quarterback position. And I hope while the Auburn offensive coaching staff is recognizing the intangibles that Bo Nix brings. Because I'm the same way. I've watched this kid play, and I love the fact that he's fiery. He's not afraid to get in your face, and he can fire up an offense. And he can fire up that fan base, too.
Yeah.
Auburn needs a face like this. Who's the last time that Auburn's had a face like that? No, not necessarily the quarterback position, but just somebody that is the face of the program that has some charisma. And I mean,
a little bit of an edge to him. I mean,
they've always been a vanilla program.
Yeah, you could say Cam Newton was that guy. He had an edge, but it wasn't an edge he created.
No.
He didn't create that edge. The media created that edge.
Right.
This is a guy who creates his own personality.
Plus you had a vanilla coach in Gene Chizik, and you got a vanilla coach in Gus Malzahn. But you need somebody like that can deflect the media scrutiny and so forth. Someone with some charisma. And I agree. I think if Bo Nix is the guy and he can have the start against Oregon and surprise Oregon a little bit, because they're not going to have seen much on him at all other than probably some tape from high school.
Yeah.
If he gets off to that start, man, Auburn fans can, probably exhale a little bit. But you look at that roster, with the exception of the quarterback position, until they make that decision, that's a roster that can challenge Alabama.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I don't know if they have the depth this far down, so they got to stay healthy. But, yeah, starting 22, they're not taking a back seat to just about anybody in the country. I will say, for Auburn fans, if you're looking for hope, when Gus has had really good teams, not only has he had a great offensive line, but they've started slow in September. So don't be ready to burn your blue and orange hat in the month of September, because they do have a tough schedule. They have Oregon, they have Texas A&M all in September. Then October 5th, they go to the Swamp. But when Gus does well, his teams grow into the season. And I think this is the type of team that if they cannot take too many gashes early on in the year, they can grow into the season and into the schedule. And if they do that, then look out.
That Oregon game, watch the fan bases from both schools.
Yeah.
Especially after the end.
Yeah.
Whatever the outcome is, because whoever lost that game, it's the end of the world. Whoever's won that game, they're exhaling big time.
Absolutely. That's a game that is going to have life and death almost at stake for some of those fans.
Do you think we can make it to Arlington at the end of August?
I will try my best. I might be waving a tomahawk, unfortunately, during that night, but we'll see. We'll see where things happen. Okay, let's move on now. Let's go to Starkville, Mississippi State. Joe Moorhead, year 2, John. I'm going to start firing bullets right out the gate. Very underachieving year 1 for Joe Moorhead, I thought.
With Nick Fitzgerald.
This team last year could have achieved a lot more than an 8-5 record, but that's what they got. Year 2 under Joe Moorhead is really the chance for Joe Moorhead to put his stamp on this team. And look, there's some players in this system. I mean, they have talent. I love Kylan Hill, the running back. To me, Kylan Hill is a lot of fun to watch. And I know they have some depth around him, but feed Kylan Hill. Give Kylan Hill the football. Let him just be himself. I think he can be a big player for this team. They got to replace some guys up front. This offensive line has a little bit of repatching to do. They got some players at wide receiver with Osiris Mitchell, but once again, let's go quarterback. That's where this team's going to be. Nick Fitzgerald out the gate. Remember that cup of coffee we saw in the bowl game 2 years ago with Keontae Thompson? Yeah. Had everybody fired up. Thompson could be the guy. Tommy Stevens is in the quarterback battle. Is this another SEC team that's going to live and die by the quarterback?
Probably. I mean, yes. And Nick Fitzgerald was such a talent there for Mississippi State, and Keontae Thompson. You know, we talk about him. He got his chance 2 years ago, and I wonder if he's going to be rewarded for that. I like some of the things that he brings to that offense. You know, I keep thinking about Kylan Hill and Joe Moorhead, and whether Kylan Hill will be the Saquon Barkley of this offense, as Barkley was for Joe Moorhead at Penn State.
That's a good comparison. That's a very good comparison.
I would think that you want him to be your Saquon Barkley this year, and I think talent-wise, he's right up there where Barkley was when going into his big year at Penn State. I think people are going to get a heavy dose of him with Nick Gibson as a nice compliment. So there's some good things about this offense I like. The defense only returning 2 starters kind of concerns me. They played really well defensively toward the end of the year last year, but a lot of those guys are gone, including their leading tackler last year, Jonathan Abram. Errol Thompson is a nice compliment there and will be asked to carry a lot of the load. But you got a lot of inexperienced seniors in that defensive unit.
Yeah.
And, I think starting off with Louisiana and Southern Miss will help that development and get those seniors who've got, some good practice experience, but not really full game experience. I think those 2 games will be a telltale sign of where this team is defensively.
I agree with you. I think that they have a potential to be good defensively, but I think that they have to figure out who everybody's role is going to be, and they have to get comfortable. I mean, look, they've got some talent. Cameron Dantzler is a very good corner. I mean, he's good in that secondary. They've got some players at linebacker with Errol Thompson. They got some players up front, Chauncey Rivers. One name I will tell you to circle, a true freshman who, if he gets his chance, I think could be a stud on this Mississippi State defensive front, is Nathan Pickering. I think Nathan Pickering can be a guy that really has a breakout year for them and gives them kind of more athletic ability to get to the quarterback up front. They've got players, but can they all play as a unit? There are questions, and they got to fill it in. Now, when you talk Mississippi State, they're always going to have a schedule that lets them kind of ease into the year. They rarely do they schedule that marquee matchup early in the season. So they're going to have a chance again to kind of get going. They got Kansas State week 3, but they're going to have a chance to kind of ease into this year and get their sea legs under them before they start SEC play. The quarterback battle is what it's going to be. I think Tommy Stevens is probably going to be the guy. He transferred over from Penn State. He sat behind Trace McSorley.
Knows the
offense from Joe Moorhead. And I think if you're going to do what you said earlier with Kylan Hill and you're going to make him your showpiece, Tommy Stevens, to me, needs to be your quarterback because he's going to complement what Kylan Hill and that running game can do a little bit better. Kadeon Thompson needs a spread offense to me. To me, he needs 5 wide receivers, quick reads, playing fast. And that's not what you really want to do if you're going to build the offense around Kylan Hill. So I kind of agree with you on that. Looking at this team, like I said, 8-5 was a disappointment last year. They could be 8-5 again. And if they're 8-5 this year, I think it's a good year. I'm not sold on 8 wins. I think 6-8 is probably where they're living at. But 8 is possible. Do you agree with me on that?
I think it's possible that 7-5 is realistic.
Yeah.
And 6-6, even if they finish 6-6, don't think of it as a disappointment. When you've got defensive guys that need to know their roles, and I think that's going to. I mean, they've got to solidify that in those first 3 games for the Mississippi State to be successful. I think the offense is going to score points, but they got to prevent other teams from scoring points, which they did a great job of last year.
Oh yeah,
and this year it's going to be a little different. So 7 wins, possibly 8, I can see from Mississippi State.
Well, let's move on to the other team in the Magnolia State, the Ole Miss Rebels. And when you talk Ole Miss, for me, previewing this season, you got to start with the coaching staff. One of the most interesting coaching staffs in all of college football because so you've got Matt Luke, who's entering year 3, okay? We know who Matt Luke is, but I would say if you're not an SEC person, you're probably not very familiar with Matt Luke. He looks more like a Sunday school teacher than a college football coach.
Good analogy.
But let's go with who his new coordinators are. Offensive coordinator, you have Rich Rodriguez coming in to run this Rebel offense. And if that's not enough cachet for you name-wise, let's go defensive coordinator, and you've got our boy Mike McIntyre from Colorado coming in. So I'm going to start this off just firing bullets. Has Ole Miss decided that Matt Luke is only going to make it midway through the year and they've already got their interims lined up?
That's a good way to look at it. I also look at it as a positive for Matt Luke, knowing that, he's kind of limited to what he can do as a head coach. Maybe he's reached his Peter principle. So he's going to go out and find the best offensive coordinator he can find. It happens to be Rich Rodriguez, who it's going to be interesting to see how he handles Oxford, Mississippi, and then find a defensive coordinator with some cachet. And Mike McIntyre's out there. He didn't do a bad job at Colorado as a head coach.
No, he did. Unjustly let
yeah. So he needs a job. So you go out and pay those guys, and you kind of be a CEO type that Herm Edwards is kind of masterminded now on the college football. But, he's going to delegate those responsibilities and be the face of the program is how I look at it. But I think you bring up a good point that they have 2 guys in case they want to make a midseason change at head coach. I didn't think Matt Luke was that tenuous, but perhaps he is at Ole Miss. But, you start off the season with 2 rivalry games at Memphis and then against Arkansas.
Yep.
That's a tough start.
It is a tough start, and it's a tough start with a lot of questionable pieces on this team. I mean, when you look at this roster, we'll do the whole starting at quarterback thing like we love doing. Matt Corral, freshman, you're up. Matt Corral is...
And his backup is a freshman, too.
Yes, and, Matt Corral, to me, is very intriguing because Matt Corral is a guy that was very hyped up coming out of high school. Mm-hmm. He was committed to Florida. He left Florida, went to Ole Miss, has had some character questions.
Yeah.
A lot of people have questioned his attitude. I would say he's a little bit more like Bo Nix, that he's a little flashy, has a little bit of attitude to him.
He's got to reel it in.
Personality, but maybe even over the edge a little more. He's past Bo Nix, but he's talented. Can he keep his head is my question. I don't think it's going to work for them this year, but I do like you mentioned the freshman quarterback behind them. They have good quarterback depth, but they're all freshmen. I like all their guys. I think Grant Tisdale could be a good college quarterback. He grew up in big-time high school football in Texas. He's been in the big programs. He is a very reliable quarterback who has pretty good arm. And then you look under him, John Reese Plumlee is another guy. John Reese Plumlee, Georgia kid, wanted to go to UGA, ended up in Oxford. He's another kid who could be this quarterback for this team. So it's probably going to be Matt Corral, but if it doesn't work out, I do think they have options. I do think they can grow at quarterback. If I'm Rich Rodriguez, knowing what I know about these three, Matt Corral's probably my guy because he can run.
Yeah.
And then you're going to want
I think he'd be a better fit for that system.
In a Rich Rod offense. I think the bigger piece is going to be, can Scotty Phillips have a breakout year at running back?
Yeah.
Because as you know, when Rich Rodriguez has his offense going, he needs that RPO to be working, and you need that running back to carry the load. Ole Miss has not really had a dynamic running back in quite some time, John.
No, it's been a long time, and Scotty Phillips has to be that guy. Isaiah Woolard is a nice complementary piece, but you can't go to war with him all the time. But I agree with you. I think you've got a nice core of quarterbacks there. Corral probably is the best fit for a Rich Rodriguez offense. But you've got to get some production from that running back position because they're kind of unproven at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, they've only got 3 starters back on offense.
Right. And only one skill position guy coming back. The rest are from the offensive line, which could help. I know they're going to go 3-4 on their defense this year. My question is, right now, do they have the personnel to run Mike McIntyre's 3-4? That would be the thing that would concern me right now. And do they have that guy that can, in the 3-4, that can rush the passer? That would be my concern right now. So you've got 2 distinguishable coordinators with an impeccable track record, and do they have the personnel? Probably Rich Rodriguez has a better fit than Mac McIntyre has. So that may cost you a few games. That would be my concern with Ole Miss.
No, I agree with you. I think that Mike McIntyre has to figure out quickly how to adapt his defense to what the SEC is going to see each week and to what he needs from this team to at least keep them in games. Early on, they're going to need to carry them because this offense is so young. I think they could be exciting. I really do. I think they've got talent. I just think that they're so young. You got to give them time to grow. Yeah. And the defense may not be able to afford that. Benito Jones is going to have to be the leader on this team. Defensive lineman, NFL draft pick coming up. He's going to be big with his play, but he's also got to be a leader vocally. Because I think this team, not just defensively, but as a team, I think they need that leader. And Benito can be that leader, but they need somebody to step up and to help keep this team right. Because week 1 and week 2, like you say, at Memphis, that's a big game to people at Ole Miss. That's a rivalry. Week 2, Arkansas. Not only is that a rivalry, which is kind of forced, but it's a rivalry, but it's also a rivalry to who's going to be the cellar dweller. I mean, both these teams desperately need this win because let's be honest, John, you lose this game, you may not win a conference game. Right. So you've got to get this win out the gate. I'm excited about week 4 with Cal coming to town just because last time they played Cal, it was very embarrassing for them. This is kind of their chance at revenge.
Yeah.
So Cal coming to Oxford, that should be a fun one. But when you get into the schedule, again, at Alabama, at Missouri from the East, that's not a good thing to
Texas
get.
A&M.
Texas A&M, at Auburn, LSU. I think you're fighting for a bowl. You're fighting for a bowl.
And I think 5-7 might be.
I think 5-7 is likely. My question would be, let's just play devil's advocate. Again, we're going to book in our Ole Miss conversation with this. 5-7 is what I probably think they'll be. Potentially ceiling, I would say. They could be worse than that, but 5-7 is the best they could be. Yeah. But let's just say they start 0-2. Memphis gets them first week. It's at Memphis.
Yeah.
Let's say Arkansas surprises them. A lot of excitement in Fayetteville. Cal comes to town. Cal beats them. They get beat by 38 to Alabama or more, just destroyed. And then I'll even give them the benefit of the doubt, say they win one out of the Vanderbilt at Missouri, Texas A&M stretch.
So they get a conference win somewhere.
You hit a bye week. Who's your interim coach, Rich Rod or Matt McIntyre?
I would go with Mike McIntyre.
I would too.
To be honest with you.
I would too. I think their head coach is coaching defense. I think their future head coach is coaching defense.
So you're thinking by the time they get their 7th loss, that decisions have been made within the athletic department at Ole Miss that change needs to happen and happen now.
Look, if they make it to October and they have less than 2 wins, if they have 1 win or less, which is very possible, very possible, I think at that point the athletic director starts looking at offense and defense, and whichever unit is hot is the guy he promotes.
It's a new guy at Ole Miss too.
Yeah, so there you go. Okay, let's finish up with your team, John. Let's talk the Arkansas Razorbacks. And I'll be honest with you, I'm excited about Arkansas. I am looking forward to seeing what they do this year. I don't think they'll be very good, but I'm excited to watch them play. I'm a big Chad Morris guy.
Yeah.
I love what he's doing. He's bringing excitement to this program, to an underrated fan base in college football. Mm-hmm. My question to you, since you know this program so well, is what are realistic expectations?
Well, my realistic expectations or general? Because my realistic expectations is 4-8 is probably where they're going to be. And those 4 wins will be the first 4 games of the season. We talked earlier about Ole Miss and Arkansas. Arkansas's got to win that game to break that conference losing streak. And then I think that'll make the Texas A&M game interesting. And the fact that if there is a 4-0 Arkansas team against a potentially 4-0 Texas A&M team, that might give them a little attention. You get Kentucky out of the East and Missouri. Right off the bat, as we tape this, Arkansas has already lost Deion Stewart for the season.
Yeah,
and
it's a big loss.
And C.J. O'Grady has some injury issues right now. It's doubtful whether he's going to be able to start the season. That's going to give the true freshman Hudson Henry a chance, who was their big in-state recruit this year.
Oh, Hunter Henry's brother.
Hunter Henry's brother, yeah. That was a must-get. Where I'm encouraged is defensively. They got pretty nasty in the spring game, and really kind of surprised some people with some of the talent and some of the ability there. So I think when you got McTelvin, Ajim, and Dejon Harris, I think you've got some good parts there. What's going to be the key for Arkansas is can they stop people and make those key stops. They did not do that at all last year. And then you got the quarterback battle.
Yep.
You got Ben Hicks, who knows the system. He played for Chad Morris at SMU. You got Nick Starkel coming in, who has a lot of credentials. He and Kellen Mond were battling at Texas A&M, and Mond beat him out, but Starkel's still pretty darn talented. And then you got John Stephen Jones, who's come on a little bit in this battle, and he's Jerry Jones's grandson, so Jerry's a former Razorback and writes large checks. Let's put it that way.
Let me stop you there, though. And you're right about that. And I know you're saying that kind of tongue-in-cheek, but let me just defend John Stephen Jones a little bit, because I know a lot of people are thinking it's because of who his grandpa is.
He's good.
John Stephen Jones is a good quarterback, folks.
He won
John
state
Stephen
titles.
Jones, he won 3.
Mm-hmm.
He won 3 straight state championships at Highland Park in Texas.
Now, that was totally tongue-in-cheek on my...
Oh, I know. I know. But I've heard that from other fans, though, about, well, of course, Jerry's grandson's going to be in there. John Stephen Jones is a very talented quarterback. The only thing I think that's holding against him is he's a pocket passer, and I think that you're going to need a little more than a pocket passer in this offense, as I'm sure you're about to allude to.
Well, that too. What I love about Arkansas's offense, though, is I think Rakeem Boyd is one of the top running backs in the SEC that nobody knows about. We've talked about a lot of those.
Is very underrated.
Devon Whaley, exactly. I was going to get to him. And then Chase Hayden.
Yeah.
I mean, you got 3 quality running backs at that position, and you can intertwine them. You can get a fresh guy in there in the fourth quarter, and the talent level doesn't drop. I think the offensive line is going to be a lot better, although they did lose one of their offensive linemen, Noah Gatlin, to injury as well. So there's a lot of positives with this team. They're just not ready to make that big, bold move. That's why I think 4-8 is probably the best this year, and those 4 wins are going to come at the beginning of the season. Now, the Missouri game, to me, is kind of a wild card, and we mentioned it earlier. It's in Little Rock. It's the last Little Rock game in foreseeable future, and it's going to be electric in there. And it's probably going to be a late afternoon game. I hope it is, because it has give some people time to get liquored up at the tailgate. That's the one that I think could be a fifth win. But 4-8 is probably more realistic.
I'm with you. Look, I love this backfield. I think this backfield is fantastic. And I mean that, not tongue-in-cheek. I'm serious. I love the running backs. I think they're great.
I do too.
I'm not as high on the offensive line as you are, but I do think there are some pieces, and they can gel.
You can only go up with that offensive line.
Well, that's a very good point. Chad Morris likes to run the ball, but he's going to have to rely on this running back stable. They got to be more heavy on the run. And that would worry me if Ben Hicks is quarterback, because I think he's going to want to rely on Ben Hicks because he knows him so well that he might get away from his running backs. Don't forget about your running backs is going to be my words of wisdom to Chad Morris. I think Nick Starkel is probably going to be the quarterback by October.
I do too.
Of his scrambling ability, his dual threat playmaking ability. I think he'll fit this team well. I'm going to be bold, John. I think this team goes bowling. I really do.
Okay.
I think Arkansas is a bowl team on the rise. They have not won a home conference game in 2 years.
Yes.
That will change this year.
Okay.
I think that it's going to change early in the season. I really do. I don't think – look, they're going to win. I think they win in Oxford. I really do. I think they beat Ole Miss. They'll beat Portland State. They got to get revenge on Colorado State from last year.
Yeah,
that debacle. They'll do that. I think they're 4-0 taking on Texas A&M. Now, they're not going to beat Texas A&M, but if they're 4-0, that's huge.
Yeah,
that's
it's huge.
Kentucky, I know it's on the road. That's winnable. That is a winnable game.
All right.
Now
you got 2 road wins in the SEC, according to you.
I'm not saying they beat Kentucky, but it's winnable. Okay. Now, there's no way in hell they win the next.
I'm going to take it.
Auburn and at Alabama, they ain't winning those games, okay? Mississippi State at home, that is a winnable game. Mississippi State is a 6-7 win team. We just talked about that. They can run the football. If there's anything that I feel like Arkansas can kind of do on defense, it's stop the run. So if Mississippi State's own quarterback issues aren't settled out, this is a very winnable game. And by this point, you would think the quarterback situation at Arkansas is settled by now.
Yeah.
After that, Western Kentucky at LSU, Missouri, I think that you can there's a chance for 6 wins. I'm not going to say it's definite. There's a chance for 6 wins. 4-8 to me is about what they probably are, but a little bit of luck, that Mississippi State game turns into a win. That Arkansas or that trip to Kentucky or the Missouri game turns into a win. You're now going bowling.
And that would be huge in Chad's second year. And, he's put together a good recruiting class. And, I'll take that. I'm more of a realist, though. And 4-8 to me just kind of feels like the right record. But, I'll take 6-6, and I totally agree with what you're saying. My next question to you is, call your score against Alabama.
My score against Alabama. Okay, so I think Arkansas will be feeling really good until they get to Texas A&M, and then I think they're going to drop 3 straight, and I think they're a 4-3 team, which is a really good record for Arkansas coming into that game. And then they go into Tuscaloosa, and it's going to be like 48-10.
Okay, that's usually the week Anthony and I don't talk to each other.
See, John feels that way. I have no problem.
Because you win.
Why would I not like Arkansas?
I don't dislike Alabama, but
I mean, the first 3 college football games I ever attended in person were all against Arkansas. And not Alabama-Arkansas games either. There were some Auburn-Arkansas thrown in there too.
Okay.
So there you go. All right, John. Well, I think we have kind of hit the SEC. I mean, spoiler alert, I know we like Alabama, Georgia, and Atlanta, right? I mean, that's
again.
That's
we've seen this script before. Does it change?
Yeah, and it's kind of cheap to say who do you like to win the SEC because who the hell knows what's going to happen with those 2 teams roster wise. But do you feel like this is the year for Georgia? I mean, I feel like it needs to be.
It has to be because they have to get over that hump. You've mentioned, and I agree with you. This is probably Kirby's most talented team he's had. And in his short tenure at Georgia, and he's followed the blueprint of Nick Saban, and great recruiting classes, trying to put a border up, a wall around the state of Georgia, and grabbing all that talent. This is the year that they've got to get over that hump. Not saying that down the road it's going to affect them, but just for the psyche of the fan base of Georgia. This has to be the year they do it. Whether they do it or not, I don't know. Alabama just right now to me has their number. And until Georgia can get it done, it's hard not to bet against Alabama. Do you feel like this is venturing on the path of the Steve Spurrier Florida run where it's like so close but yet no cigar? I mean, if they lose this year, if that scenario plays out, they make it to Atlanta and Alabama wins yet again. Yeah. We're in that territory now, right? We're there, and don't you kind of feel that if that title game was somewhere other than Atlanta, that Georgia might have a better shot? If not necessarily Birmingham, but I mean, if it was in a different venue where you're not constantly bombarded by your home fans in your home state. Don't you kind of get a feeling that might behoove Georgia a little bit? That's a fair point. I mean, the pressure, okay, let me say it this way. I don't think that necessarily happened in the last 2 meetings because I think the championship game, the adrenaline was so high that it could have been played anywhere on earth. It didn't matter. I think the SEC Nirvana game. Yeah, I think last year in Atlanta – for the SEC title game, it helped them because they were such dogs. Yeah. There were such underdogs in that game that, go back. Nobody was picking them to win that game. Right. Nobody thought that they had a chance in that game. I agree. And they outplayed Alabama for 59 minutes. So I think it helped them in that game. But I think you have a point. If we get yet again, same venue, same song and dance, I do think that could be the pucker factor of here we are, hostile environment. We outnumber them in the building, and that first sign of, we're kind of shaking out of the gate, there might be some muttering in the crowd. I think there could be something there. But we are miles from there. So we got a long season until we get to that point, John. We do. And next time we convene, we get to talk about games. Actual football. I can't wait. Because Florida and Miami will open the season, and Week 0. They play for the Seminole War Canoe, although they don't acknowledge. Are they literally going to play for the Seminole War Canoe though? Or you remember when we talked to their coaching staff a few years ago at ACC Media Day? Al Golden had no idea what we were talking about. No idea what we were talking about. Neither did Will Muschamp, to be fair. No idea. I would love, in honor of this week, if anyone could find the authentic current Seminole War Canoe and send us a picture, I will give you a prize. I don't know what that prize is going to be yet. I will give you a prize, and it'll be a worthwhile prize. Wow. Maybe a college football debrief T-shirt. It'll be better than that, I can promise you. Not that there's anything wrong with our T-shirts, but I'm going big prize. Big reward, but it's got to be the authentic Seminole War Canoe. Okay. I don't know if it exists. That might be a trick question. It might have been burned. I don't know either, but We shall see. So, we've previewed the SEC. Now let's start talking about games. Anthony and I will reconvene and talk about Florida-Miami. It's week 0. It's time for toe to meet leather. So, for Anthony Goldman, I'm John Wilkerson. We appreciate you joining us here on the College Football Debrief. And you can hear us on Stitcher, Spotify, Spreaker, SoundCloud, wherever you catch your podcast. Just look for the College Football Debrief. For Anthony, I'm John. So long, everyone.